その先にあるものは幸せか、それとも不幸せか。
Rena Ryuugu is the face of Higurashi, full stop. She is prominently featured in much of the promotional material, for instance, laying claim to most of the cover art for the sound novel releases, acting as a sort of unofficial mascot for the franchise. And for good reason, as not only is she an indisputable fan favorite and major driving force behind the success of the series, but she really is an appropriate and compelling personification of Higurashi itself, disarmingly cute and sugary, radiating with pure innocence, all in service of concealing a thorough and thought-provoking exploration of complex character motivations through the lens of cascading emotional turmoil. As usual, I'll be going predominantly by what is covered in the sound novel and manga, as the anime adaptation simply moves far too quickly to cover anything at a level of detail that could be described as adequate. So with that, let's get started. Rena Ryuugu, who once upon a time went by her true given name, Rena, was born in Hinamizawa as the child of two fashion designers who would eventually relocate to the city of Ibaraki in order to advance their careers. Her mother is the breadwinner of the family, leaving Rena by her father's side, taking up chores to help tend to the household while her mother is out and about working long hours, providing the necessary financial support. One fateful day, Rena's mother reveals that she's been involved in an ongoing affair with a man named Akihito, whom she has introduced to Rena several times in the past, and is on the verge of filing for divorce, wishing to bring Rena along with her on her new journey. Rena, having developed a much closer relationship with her father, unequivocally rejects this proposal, regarding her mother as nothing more than an unsavory, gallivanting paramour, having betrayed the trust of her father and callously upended their tight-knit family unit, which she now realizes has been nothing more than a farce. Rena completely disowns her mother and blames herself for ever placing any degree of trust in Akihito, with the belief that, without her blind naivete, this entire catastrophe could have been avoided. Unbeknownst to Rena, the stress of dealing with the fallout of her family's fracturing and her intense feelings of self-hatred caused the Hinamizawa virus buried deep inside her, laid dormant ever since the initial move out to Ibaraki, to awaken. Before leaving Ibaraki, she succumbs to the first symptoms of the virus, culminating in a complete mental breakdown where she lashes out against her fellow classmates, severely injuring 3 of them, and going on a violent rampage throughout the school. The virus also takes root in the form of a fragment of her conscience, which she refers to as the Hinamizawa guardian deity, Oyashiro-sama, whose voice implores her to return home to Hinamizawa. Rena, now calling herself Rena, discarding the I as it reminds her of painful things, heeds Oyashiro-sama's guidance, believing that the calamity that tore her family apart was her divine punishment for having left Hinamizawa in the first place. Vowing to atone for that mistake, Rena departs with her father back to her rural hometown, where she aims to forge a life of eternal happiness, vigilantly defending it from those who would threaten to take it away from her. Rena's life upon returning to Hinamizawa could be described as fairly normal and unspectacular, though because of that, she is fiercely protective of the relative tranquility that she had sought to reclaim. Rena goes on to take center stage in Sumi Horoboshi, the second answer arc, which begins in earnest when her father falls for a swindler named Rina Mamiya. Rena is instantly wary of Rena, preferring to spend her spare time in solitude away from the Ryuugu household, with her instincts warning her that Rena is nothing but trouble. And trouble she turns out to be, as Rena inadvertently ends up eavesdropping on Rena and Teppei's scheme, a plan which involves pulling one over on their latest mark, Rena's father, extorting the family for millions of yen. While musing over how to handle the situation, Rena is confronted by Rena at her junkyard hideout, leading to an altercation where Rena kills Rena in self-defense and immediately pounces on the opportunity to use Rena's unexplained disappearance as a means of luring Teppei out to the site, where she proceeds to unflinchingly bring his life to an unceremonious end. Rena eventually comes to confess her sins in a tearful, cleansing outpouring to the rest of the club, prompting her friends to console her, agreeing to chip in and help dispose of the 2 corpses. While it initially seems that their solidarity has managed to whip up a major tailwind to salvage Rena's humanity, this incident marks the beginning of Rena's slow descent into madness. She has a fateful run-in with Takano, who leaves her with a scrapbook full of wild conspiracy theories, which, when coupled with the startling reveal of Takano's chillingly retroactive death, sends the steadily growing paranoia within Rena into overdrive. Now a complete prisoner to the disease, Rena proceeds to take extreme measures to protect Hinamizawa from the enemies she sees lurking in every shadow and around every corner, and whom she believes are dead set on bringing the village, in other words, her precious sanctuary, to ruin. Rena's delirium reaches critical mass when she takes hostage of the entire school, with the aim of blowing the building to pieces along with all the children within, unless the police pledge their aid to help overturn the conspiracy. The standoff ends in a climactic showdown with Keiichi, where Rena is finally brought to her senses, as Keiichi is able to convince her that her friends have never once given up on her, in spite of all of her horrific transgressions. Thus, Rena is finally able to break free of the bloodstained trance of Oyashiro-sama, regaining her sanity and bringing the crisis to an end, with one hell of a curtain call, courtesy of Keiichi's theatrical decree to all the would-be demons of Hinamizawa. More so than anyone else in Higurashi, Rena is defined by duality. She alternates between the naive, cute mode Rena, who habitually ends her sentences with and spends hours wading through the local dump, eagerly hauling home anything and everything that she finds even the least bit adorable, and the ominous and foreboding Rena, who acts wise beyond her years, terrifyingly perceptive, able to read people and situations to their very core at a glance, correctly identifying the culprit of Watanagashi merely through a quick survey of Rika and Satoko's refrigerator, and sussing out the true nature of Shion's conflicted inner feelings towards the Hojo siblings just by casually observing her interactions with Satoshi. She can be warm, impulsive, and comforting one second, and cold, calculating, and ruthless the next.
大丈夫
Capable of concocting a plan for Teppei's demise on the spot, while also possessing the frightening mental fortitude to see it through to its grisly conclusion, by her own hands and without a hint of hesitation or remorse. Befitting her dual-natured personality, Rena cleanly partitions her judgment of the people she crosses paths with in her life, classifying them as either those who would threaten her happiness or those that wouldn't, and treats them accordingly, dosing out equal amounts of cruel aggression and unbridled compassion, respectively, a draconian sentiment that the folks over at the Sonozaki household similarly abide by. Because of this, depending on the situation, Rena can come across as unflappable as bedrock, able to see the best in people even in the most dire or disconcerting of circumstances, whether it be Mion, really Shion, at the end of Watanagashi, who has, at this point in the arc, presumably snuffed out the lives of Rika and Satoko, or Keiichi during the climax of Onikakushi, where she refuses to discard her faith in him, even with her dying breath. But on the flip side, if she ever perceives that the faith she's placed in someone, that she's so cautiously bestowed upon a privileged few, has been compromised, then they'd best steel themselves in preparation for the worst. Her infamous outburst in Onikakushi shows her lack of tolerance for lies, as she sees them as trampling all over that faith. While it may seem like Rena's duality is chaotic, emerging at times seemingly out of nowhere, a closer inspection reveals a definite logic behind it, driven by Rena's constantly polarized perception of the world. A common theme that is shared among the Higurashi cast is isolation, paired with a yearning for a sense of belonging. In Keiichi's case, it's looking to Hinamizawa as a way to escape from his sordid past, only to find himself branded as an outsider for not falling in line with the unorthodox, hyper-traditionalist values and customs of the village. In Shion's case, it's having her childhood and identity forcibly wrenched from her, with the Sonozaki family ostracizing and abandoning her at St. Lucia's Academy, leaving her socially and emotionally stunted, rife with sociopathic tendencies. In Rena's case, her isolation manifests from her adamant refusal to rely on others. While she has no issue going to great lengths to stand up for and protect her friends, she is unwilling to confide in them, and not purely to avoid unnecessarily burdening others, but rather because she regards interdependence as a mark of weakness, a belief stemming from having witnessed Satoshi's vain attempt to reach out to the same group of friends, only to be left fending for himself, which, well, we all know how that situation turned out. Rena's disillusionment subsequently leads to her deliberate emotional withdrawal, preferring not to risk the pain and helplessness incurred from being let down by those closest to her, leading to her treating friendship as a perilously inverted facsimile of itself, where she feels comforted by its warm embrace when she needs it the least, and left frozen out, alone and abandoned when she desperately needs it the most. Of course, this behavior is a distillation of the root of all of Rena's inner turmoil, which is trust. More specifically, her inability to trust that others will have her back in the same way that she has theirs, as she has learned through both her own first-hand experience and through Satoshi, the wholesale devastation that can be wrought when that trust is abruptly shattered. This is likely why, consciously or otherwise, she hones her ability to become acutely aware of both people and situations, believing it best to rely on her own instincts, as well as the voice of Oyashiro-sama, rather than leaning on others for answers, guidance, or support. This decidedly tendentious worldview is, of course, viciously skewered by the events of Sumi Horoboshi, subjecting Rena to a chain of nearly endless suffering, starting with the completely avoidable deaths of Rina and Teppei, progressing to her harrowing emotional breakdown, where the darkest, most tortured part of her soul is dragged out into the light of the setting sun, resembling a scrap of blackened, wretched refuse that manages to tower over the boundless sea of detritus that she calls home. and concluding with her unconditional surrender to the false belief that the situation that she had so long dreaded and tried desperately to avoid had finally come to pass, the complete and utter betrayal of each and every one of her closest friends, driving her to her breaking point. It is thanks to the efforts of Keiichi, who in this arc manages to overcome his own inner demons by recalling the tragic conclusion to Onikakushi, realizes the same fate is befalling Rena, and spends the remainder of the arc seeking to regain her trust at all costs, culminating in their moonlight-drenched dance to the death, where the authenticity of Keiichi's words finally dawns on her, as she acknowledges that the trust she'd placed in her friends, and that they'd placed in her, is something that no sin, no matter how grievous or unforgivable, could ever erase. Thus, Rena's story ends with her second tear-stained catharsis, and the acceptance that she no longer has to bear the incalculable weight of her suffering alone. While Rena's legacy will undoubtedly resonate as the cute and charming airhead who can turn into a homicidal cleaver-wielding maniac at the drop of a hat, the Rena I prefer to take with me is the vastly more intricate and multifaceted one, whose convoluted journey of self-discovery is an incisive and poignant exposition on the staggeringly paradoxical nature of interpersonal relationships. Why we struggle so hard to be open and honest, even among our closest circle, because the fear of that friendship fracturing constantly leads us to seek refuge in the stability of comfortable aloofness. And through her journey, Rena urges us to not give in to that innate fear, because a friendship rooted in unchanging, unblemished harmony, without pain, without turbulence, without conflict, could hardly be called friendship at all.
レナにはまだ選べる選択肢が残ってるんだ。だから選べ。間に合う。来るんだ。俺たちはやり直せるんだ。